I've replayed that night in my head so many times it's hard to believe it was real.
It was my birthday. I was 29, pregnant, and planning to tell everyone the news in the most special way I could think of. My boyfriend Ethan and I had been together for over 3 years. He was charming, attentive, always knew the right thing to say, the kind of guy who made eye contact and asked thoughtful questions. We lived together in a tiny but cozy apartment just outside Portland. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. For weeks, I'd been planning the party. It was just a small gathering, some of our closest friends, good food, twinkle lights on the patio, and a homemade cake. I thought it would be the perfect moment to share our news. I had this dream in my head of Ethan smiling, our friends cheering, me holding up a tiny onesie with "coming soon" written on it. Silly maybe, but it felt magical in my mind. Instead, Ethan handed me a box. It was beautifully wrapped. Cream paper, a navy silk ribbon. Everyone watched as I opened it. A few people already filming, probably expecting a proposal. For a split second, so did I. But it wasn't a ring, it was a folded sheet of paper. I remember the silence, the way the music seemed to fade. I unfolded the note slowly, thinking it was part of some elaborate joke. It wasn't. "I'm leaving you. You're useless and I deserve better. Your things will be packed by Monday." That was it. I looked up, stunned, and Ethan just smiled, cold, smug. Then, in front of everyone, he said, "We're done. It's been fun, but I've outgrown you." And he laughed. Not just a chuckle, a full-on, head thrown back laugh. A few people joined in thinking it was a prank, but then Ethan turned, walked out the door, and didn't look back. The room was dead silent. I stood there holding that note, my heart racing, my stomach turning, not from the pregnancy, but from pure humiliation. My friend Tara rushed to my side, took the note from my hand, and muttered, "What an absolute piece of trash." People started whispering, asking if I was okay. I nodded, I smiled, I told them I was fine. I wasn't, but I smiled anyway, because Ethan had no idea what was coming. He didn't know I was pregnant. He didn't know I had seen the texts on his smartwatch 2 weeks ago when he left it charging in the kitchen, flirty messages to someone named Jay. He didn't know I'd found the hotel receipts in his coat pocket or the jewelry box in his desk drawer. Definitely not for me. And he definitely didn't know that I wasn't the kind of woman who falls apart when someone tries to break her. I get strategic. So yes, I got the cake, I thanked everyone for coming, I passed out slices with shaking hands, and smiled like my world hadn't just imploded. Because that night, Ethan thought he'd ended our story. But I was just getting started. The next morning, the silence in the apartment was unbearable. It wasn't just the absence of Ethan's voice or the usual clutter of his morning routine. It was the echo of everything he destroyed with just one folded note. My best friend, Tara, had stayed the night, refusing to let me be alone. I woke up to the smell of coffee and the quiet clinking of dishes. When I shuffled into the kitchen, she was already setting a plate of toast in front of me, pretending like it was any other Saturday morning. It wasn't. I sat at the table, numb, staring into the steam rising from my mug. After a long pause, I finally said it out loud. "I'm pregnant." Tara didn't gasp, she didn't flinch, she just nodded slowly, reached across the table, and squeezed my hand. "I had a feeling," she said gently. "Are you going to tell him?" I shook my head. "Not yet, maybe not ever." Because in that moment, one thing had become crystal clear. I couldn't trust Ethan with my heart, let alone a child. After breakfast, Tara helped me start boxing up Ethan's remaining things. I didn't throw a tantrum or tear up his clothes like some melodramatic breakup montage. No, I labeled each box calmly. I was done letting him create chaos. From now on, I was in control. That day was a blur of phone calls and planning. I scheduled an appointment with my doctor to confirm the pregnancy and start prenatal care. I also called a lawyer just to get informed. The apartment lease was in both our names, and I wasn't about to be blindsided again. I spent the afternoon curled on the couch with Tara, laptop open, budgeting out how I could manage everything on one income. My job in marketing was steady, but Ethan had been paying less and less of the rent over the past few months. Looking back, it all made sense now. His late nights, the unexplained expenses, the detachment. The messages started rolling in from our friends. Some were concerned, others were confused. A few tried to be neutral, tiptoeing around the subject. I responded to the ones who genuinely cared, the rest I ignored. But the one person I didn't hear from, Ethan. Until Sunday night. My phone buzzed with a text that read, "I'll be by Friday to pick up my stuff. Make sure you're not there." No apology, no explanation, just more control. I stared at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the screen, debating whether to even respond. But then I typed a single word and hit send. No, I wouldn't disappear. No, I wouldn't let him dictate the terms. No, it wouldn't make this breakup easy for him. Because Ethan thought he'd burned the bridge and walked away clean. But what he didn't realize was I was already building something better on the other side, something stronger, something for me and the life growing inside me. I wasn't just surviving, I was preparing. And this time, I was the one holding the cards. Friday came faster than I expected. I spent the morning tidying the apartment, not because I wanted it to look nice for Ethan, but because reclaiming the space made me feel powerful. Every time I folded one of his old shirts or sealed another box with tape, it felt like I was packing up not just his belongings, but the lies he'd buried in every corner of our home. Tara showed up around 4:30, just like we planned. She wasn't alone. Our friends Marcus and Jen came too. I hadn't asked them to, but they said they wanted to be there, not to start drama, but to make sure I didn't have to face Ethan alone. It reminded me that while Ethan had left a gaping hole in my life, it wasn't empty. My support system had already started filling in the cracks. At exactly 5 p.m., the buzzer rang. I didn't flinch. Ethan walked in like he owned the place. Same smug expression, same designer coat he always wore when he wanted to impress someone. But there was something off. His posture wasn't quite as straight. His eyes darted more than usual. He clearly didn't expect to see other people. His gaze flicked around the room, landing on each of my friends before settling on me. "Seriously," he said, like I'd broken some unspoken rule, "you needed a whole audience?" I stayed seated. I needed support, something you wouldn't understand. He rolled his eyes but didn't argue, just walked past us and started stacking boxes without saying much. The tension in the room was thick. I could feel Marcus watching him like a hawk. After about 10 minutes, Ethan grabbed a box that wasn't his, one that held my baby books and a folder of documents I'd been organizing. I stood up, voice low but firm. "Leave that, it's mine," he scoffed. "Since when do we have separate stuff?" I walked toward him, stopping just a few feet away. "Since you handed me a breakup note in front of our friends and called me useless." He went silent. He looked around, maybe realizing this wasn't the power play he thought it would be. Then he did something unexpected. He sighed and said, "You weren't supposed to take it like that. It was supposed to be clean, no fighting, just done." He nearly laughed. "You don't get to choose how someone reacts to being humiliated, Ethan." He nodded slowly, like for the first time he was hearing me. Really hearing me. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a spare key, and placed it on the counter. "I'll be out in 15. Didn't say thank you. I didn't need to. When he finally left, the apartment felt lighter, not just physically, but spiritually. It was mine again, mine and the baby. Later that night, I curled up in bed, one hand resting on my still flat stomach, and whispered, "We're okay." I meant it. Because Ethan had walked out thinking he left me broken. But he didn't know I was already rebuilding, quietly, steadily, and stronger than ever. A week after Ethan collected his things, the apartment finally felt like mine again. I rearranged the furniture, not because I needed to, but because I wanted a fresh start. I moved the couch closer to the window where the light hit just right in the mornings, replaced the photos on the wall, even bought a cheap little rug that didn't match anything but made me smile every time I saw it. One afternoon, I was organizing some files when a message popped up on my phone. It was from Marcus. "You were right about him. I saw Ethan last night. He was with her. The one with the flirty texts and the suspicious hotel receipts, the one Ethan thought I didn't know about. And while Marcus didn't say her name, I didn't need him to. I knew exactly who he meant. Janelle. Janelle had been a mutual friend, or so I thought. She was at the birthday party. She brought a bottle of wine and a fake smile. She left early, saying she had a migraine. Turns out she just didn't want to stick around to see the fallout. Guilty consciences rarely like to linger. I sat with the text for a moment, letting the truth settle in. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even angry anymore. I just felt done. Ethan hadn't just cheated. He'd planned his escape while still pretending to hold my hand. And yet, the part that stung wasn't the betrayal. It was the performance, the birthday note, the public spectacle, the way he tried to make me look small so he could feel big. But he underestimated me. The next day, I scheduled another doctor's appointment, started researching prenatal yoga classes, and met with the lawyer again to finalize what we'd started: custody, child support, boundaries. I wasn't waiting for Ethan to step up anymore. I was putting everything in writing. Then, on a Thursday night around 11:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the peephole and saw him. Ethan. He looked terrible, disheveled, eyes bloodshot, swaying slightly. And then I heard it, his voice, slurred but loud. "Clara, open the door. I just need to talk to you, please." I didn't move, just listened. "I made a mistake, okay? I messed up. I know that now. You were right about everything. I shouldn't have left. I shouldn't have done it like that." There was a pause, then a soft thud against the door. His forehead or his hand, I couldn't tell. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I found out you're pregnant. It's mine, right? Of course it is. I want to be there. I want to fix this." A part of me wanted to yell, to remind him that fatherhood isn't a part-time gig, that you don't get to burn the house down and then cry when it's cold outside. But I didn't yell. Instead, I spoke through the door, calm, controlled. "You're drunk. Go home. We'll talk when you're sober." He begged again, said Janelle had left him, said nothing was working out the way he thought it would. And that's when it hit me. He hadn't come back for me. He came back because the life he ran to wasn't what he imagined, because the fantasy collapsed, and now he was looking for shelter in the wreckage he left behind. But I wasn't his shelter anymore. I told him we could meet the next morning at the cafe down the street, public, neutral, daylight. He agreed. I watched through the window as he stumbled back to the curb and climbed into a rideshare. As I closed the door, locking it behind me, I whispered to myself, he doesn't get to come back just because it's convenient. This time, I set the terms. Not for revenge, not out of bitterness, but for the sake of the tiny life growing inside me. Because I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was protecting my child. Ethan showed up at the cafe the next morning, miraculously sober, but barely holding it together. He looked worn down, like the last few weeks had finally caught up to him. There were bags under his eyes, his shirt was wrinkled, and he kept tapping his fingers against the table like he was trying to keep time with a song only he could hear. I got there a few minutes late on purpose. I wanted him to wait. He stood when he saw me as if we were still a couple and this was a first date. I didn't return the gesture. I sat down, ordered my herbal tea, and waited for him to speak. "I'm sorry," he started. Again, about the party, the note, everything. I didn't say anything, just nodded. Slowly, he continued, fumbling over his words, trying to explain that he panicked, that he felt trapped, that Janelle made him feel seen. I let him talk, let him fill the space with excuses and half-truths, because I wasn't here to argue. I wasn't here to forgive him either. When he finally paused, I pulled out a folder from my tote bag and slid it across the table. "What's this?" he asked. "Child support paperwork, custody agreements. My lawyer drafted everything. You can have your attorney review it and get back to me." His jaw tightened, but he didn't say no. "I'm not keeping the baby from you, Ethan, but I'm not making space for chaos either. This is the structure. If you want to be involved, you'll follow it." He nodded slowly, thumbing through the documents, his hands shaking just slightly. "So That's it? We're just done? And I looked him in the eye. We were done the moment you handed me that box. This, I pointed to my stomach, now starting to round slightly beneath my sweater. This isn't about us. It's about what's best for the baby. And that means peace, stability, and honesty. 3 things you weren't ready to give. He swallowed hard. For the first time, he didn't argue. I want to try, he said quietly. Not with us, he caught himself. I want to try to be a good dad. I don't know how, but I'm willing to learn. That was the first real thing he'd said since the party. I told him I hoped he meant that I wasn't interested in perfect, just consistent. That being a father wasn't a role he could audition for when it suited him. It was a lifetime contract. We finished our drinks in near silence. When I stood to leave, he reached into his coat and handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a journal, simple, leather-bound, nothing fancy. For your thoughts, he said, or whatever you need it for. You were never useless, Clara. I was just too stupid to see your value. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just said, take care of yourself, Ethan, and walked away. Back at home, I placed the journal on my nightstand. That evening, I opened it and wrote the first page. Doom day, I'll tell you everything. How you came into the world, how strong we had to be, not to burden you, but to show you that beginnings don't have to be perfect to be powerful. The days that followed weren't magical. They were ordinary and exhausting. I worked, I nested, I met with my doctor, even signed the paperwork without a fight. He started showing up for prenatal appointments. Quiet, respectful, unsure, but present. And when our daughter was born 2 months later, he was there, not front and center, but at the edge of the room, eyes wide, with something that looked a lot like humility. We named her Grace because after everything, after the lies, the heartbreak, the humiliation, what remained was this tiny, beautiful, miraculous second chance. And I took it with open arms.